With the AI Applied Consortium. Today, we're going to be diving into a couple of interesting topics around the public sector and the applications of artificial intelligence. And I have two esteemed guests, one of them a trustee to the consortium, Michael Braun, and another, Rebecca Beers. I'm going to let them introduce themselves here shortly. But before I do, I want to maybe set some context for the discussion. And for those of you who haven't heard a podcast before, the goal really is to get a level of engagement from our consortium community of followers and to share some of the thought leadership and to also, keep you fixed here, hopefully for 1 full hour in a discussion between ourselves. I like to keep things somewhat like loose. So we're going to touch upon some technical topics, but there's no promise or obligation that we're going to deep dive into these in an hour. There's a lot to talk upon. If you've heard the previous two sessions, we had the Chancellor of Penn State on for our opening session, and then the Director of Innovation of BP for the second of the series. And both of them kind of showed the variety of how we intend on approaching these podcasts. So really, hopefully you'll like it. And if you don't, like I said last time, you'll know what not to listen to next time when you try to follow us. And so without further ado, I want to let the audience here, or our speakers rather, introduce themselves. We can start with Rebecca and then Michael, and then we can talk to these very interesting topics about the public sector and AI.
Very good.
So Rebecca, why don't you go first?
Hi, I'm Rebecca Beers. I am the Managing Director of the Salesforce practice for Canopy Management Consulting. I am the Salesforce lead and am 15 times Salesforce certified, fully certified in Agentforce with Salesforce, although I do not claim to be an AI expert or an Agentforce expert. I have been in the Salesforce ecosystem for about 10 years now. And the majority of that time has been working with public sector, local, state, and government clients.
Thank you, Rebecca. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Braun. I'm a digital infrastructure advisor for Canopy Management Consulting, and I am the advisory group chairman for the Public Sector Advisory Group here with the Applied AI Consortium. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Very excited. I have been interested in AI since I cut my teeth at AT&T. I was doing a bunch of different data projects. Essentially, I started by automating Excel spreadsheets using macros, and I just kept peeling back layers and finding more data and finding new ways to put the data together. And what really connected it to AI for me was working with the burgeoning Internet of Things discipline and understanding that all of these different devices are going to be connected and they're all going to be collecting data. And I coupled that with I'll admit it's a little odd, I have a passion for municipal government, for local government. I ran for city council a while ago, and you'll notice I'm not currently a city council member, but that's okay. Sometimes you got to run 2 or 3 times. So that's why I'm here, and I'm looking forward to talking with Konrad.
Thanks, Michael. Enough about you guys. Maybe I can introduce myself. Those of you who don't know me, I am the chair of the Applied Consortium. I guess an entrepreneur really by heart. I've run consortia like this in the past. I've worked for several different Fortune 500 companies, kind of evolving their emerging technologies, AI programs. And I do like to talk about the technology. And in fact, that's probably one of the reasons why we're having these podcasts outside of the promotion within the consortium is I enjoy, both speaking, but listening to experts like yourself help us navigate these waters, because there's a lot of waters to navigate and they're moving very quickly, let's say. And so I want to start by just maybe laying some groundwork for discussion, because you've heard before, I like to go off the rails and I'm not very scripted. So what I want to lay as a groundwork, I think, is the public sector. In my exposure to it, it's kind of been piecemeal. I'm not focused in this space. Michael, you are, as a public sector lead within the advisory council, and then your background, and I know, Rebecca, you as well. I find it an interesting kind of engagement. And what I mean by that is, I think, first of all, and this isn't exclusive to the public sector, there's a lot of red tape, for lack of a better word. and that red tape in the form of contract vehicles, in the form of the cultural kind of perception of how you look at technology is very much, I believe, like a barrier, which is incidentally the consortium's mission statement is to break barriers of adoption of artificial intelligence in verticals. So in part, this is a perfect conversation to have. And I like you guys, I guess in the next hour, I want to unpack that. I want to unpack it with the lens of the audience I believe might be listening. So we talked about this just right before the call, right? Is I believe that there may be three different categories of audience listening. One of them is technology vendors that are interested in learning more about this space so they can better deliver and articulate technologies to this space, and obviously bring in this technologies in the form of AI. The public sector itself that is interested in adopting artificial intelligence and is also looking at ways to navigate these waters because of the speed in which it's evolving and kind of their own red tape that they have to navigate. And then, I'll just say casual listeners that just wanted to listen to us or see our pretty faces on camera, which I guess also means that, part of what we want to do is stay interesting. But I will also highlight another part is a lot of times when we do retrospectives, not just in the podcast, because I don't think I've done any in the podcast, but just general stuff that we do with our leadership, a lot of the things that is missing is concrete examples. People are missing the concrete examples. So I think theory is important. Let's talk about it. But let's talk about specific things maybe that people are challenged with and specific things that the public sector can do with this technology. So I want to start maybe with the thing that's top of mind is it's exactly what I wrote into the chat here is real world examples of how artificial intelligence is or can help the public sector. And I will flip it. I know we kind of talked about doing the theory first, but I wanted to keep you guys on your toes. So you guys, I don't know, Mike, do you want to start? Let's start with you, Michael.
I will start, and I'll go the more obscure to the more applicable, because what's obscure today is going to be very applicable tomorrow, and we understand that AI is going to open up a lot of pathways that were previously shut to us. We'll start with something very close to municipalities, which is traffic and pedestrian monitoring. There's various different device structures already in place that will monitor your pedestrians, monitor your traffic, make it safer for your pedestrians to move about your city. But one of the things that AI does is it unlocks data sets that were previously unavailable because they were too big or too obscure. One of those data sets is all of the video streams that stream into municipalities on a daily basis, either from public safety cameras, traffic cameras. There's a lot of video infrastructure that's been set up in cities already, and we have with YOLO, with OpenCV, with Depth AI, with all of these, with Florence 2, with all of these AI models that are being continuously improved and put out open source. Cities have a chance to take that video feed and turn it into a very effective pedestrian safety and pedestrian analytics system, and the same with vehicle safety and vehicle traffic. It's just a common example of you have a very big data set that you can use available models to get value out of. So that's something that the consortium is currently working on. That's something that we've partnered with a couple of different companies who are trying to work on that sort of thing. You can see it advancing. You can see it advancing. This type.
Let me ask you, Michael, on this use case, right? Like trying to empathize with somebody maybe listening or someone that has explored these avenues before. To me, you mentioned a couple of like cool technologies that I'm, kind of roll up my sleeve with, including Florence 2, which is a multimodal model. And I think those are the kind of areas that enable these things to take place or enable these use cases in both in terms of the effort required and the speed in which they can be enabled a lot easier. Because computer vision has been around in the public sector space, I don't want to say forever, because that's not true, but it's kind of it's not only matured, but it's opened up, because of these new technologies, a spectrum of different things that you can do with it, right?
Yes.
Um, and I think, like, so that's important to consider. But we're going to unpack that. But I want to give Rebecca a chance to give some examples, and I'll make it easy for you. If you want to talk about Agent Force,
Sure.
I will be honest. I very much like to do things hands-on before these types of sessions.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and I've already used some of the other agentic tooling, like AutoGen, like Crew AI.
Yep.
I tried to get Agent Force to work, but the instructions include me having to download some foundational tooling and then enable uh, Einstein AI. And then apparently, even though they say it's free, it's not really free as far as I can understand. You have to, like, it's free for the people that have already paid for some baseline functionality. So I wound up at a dead end
Mm-hmm.
with it. But I maybe, like, one, it doesn't have to be Agent Force. It could be like some sort of a like use case
Mm-hmm.
or use cases for public sector that we can start off maybe as a level set, and then we'll unpack those as we progress.
Sure. Happy to talk about Agent Force and Salesforce, and really talk about the public sector use cases for it. The majority of what Salesforce is doing in Agent Force and the public sector side is all about automation and increased efficiency for all the constituents and really constituent experience. So in government, our constituents are all of our citizens of our states, of our cities. And anytime they have to interact with a database of information or submit a claim for code enforcement or any of those kind of things that happen on an everyday basis, they're interacting with the system. And what Agent Force is really, really good at, even in its beginning forms like it is now, is managing, giving you the whole picture, that constituent 360, where you can see all interactions that constituent, that person has had with the different departments in your agency. Did they get funding for through a grant program? Did they ask for assistance in something in their neighborhood being wrong and they want to file a claim with the city? Worked in solutions, and the city I live in has a Salesforce solution that manages its city organization, and people file claims there for even during hurricanes that we have here in Florida. They use that Salesforce interaction as a place for constituents to come in and report claims. So, how agents can help that is one, giving that whole picture, but also it can answer simple questions. When is the next clean out crew coming to take away my debris? That can be listed right there and answered by an agent because you can program it to read the set of information that's there. Those are just small examples of how it's being used currently. Um, Things like digital assessments. When you're meeting with a client and you want to talk to them about all of the services they're receiving, being able to put in all their information and do that assessment with an AI agent or an automate automated agent, um, that helps speed the process tremendously. All the documents are there. Everything is there to view and read and help with that constituent, and they can update their own information. So those kind of things are really helpful, with dealing with the public and in helping to improve efficiencies.
Right. Yeah. Just to kind of sidebar that, um, I've had a chance to work with a few public sector organizations, and part of what they've articulated to me in kind of a joint conversation, like to this, but it was in
Mm-hmm.
person, is that, so behind agents sits frameworks, and those frameworks have purpose, like the
Yes.
agentic frameworks, right? Some of those purposes are like technology driven to enable better outcome, because if you have multiple agents, they can kind of do more specialized things better. But also, it's kind of it's from what I heard, and you can maybe validate this a little bit. um, the architecture of agents allows for these implicit silos that exist between specializations in government to
Mm-hmm.
work on that agent that is part of their particular silo. So if you are in contracts, for example, or if you're in some safety role, you as a domain expert can contribute to the evolution of that discrete agent, and then the agents come together for purpose as part of like what they're trying to achieve as an outcome. But that then enables, I think, um, a lot of those barriers that exist with people
Mm-hmm.
to bring them together to accomplish tasks, to have buy-in against the effort being done. I think that implicitly is baked in there. So I don't know if I just spoke myself into your point or not, but that just as an introduction, would you agree with that?
I would actually. And, all of the things we talk about that AI can do, it has to be trained. So those models that we're talking about, the large language model LLMs, or even the smaller, more specific models like you're talking about that are trained for specific actions that then can join together with some of those LLMs, it takes all of those different pieces to be involved in making AI successful. And it isn't going to happen out of nowhere. You need the people who are there, who know the business to train the models, but then that takes some of the daily work out of it for those individuals. And the people who are doing the work then now get to do the more human side of it, the real evaluation, the making sure that all the numbers are correct and that the person's getting the right service, and all of those kind of things don't happen with AI. It does the logic for you and you can program it to do that, but you need that human side of it as well.
Conrad, if I could go off of that, you're talking about silos and structures of work and all of the things that, as somebody who has been a manager in the public sector or an individual contributor in the public sector for a long time, we've heard the conversation around silos go back and forth, not just in public sector, obviously, this is in the private sector as well. But there was such a fear around siloing work because the concept of that, the concern that this domain knowledge, which is hard fought and hard won, a lot of problems will be solved, a lot of innovation and process will be done. The concern was that that would die with when the person retired or moved forward or moved on, that all of that domain knowledge becomes tribal knowledge, and then we lose something when we have to move on to the next person. I think one of the biggest low-hanging fruit for the public sector is to run different AI models on top of the existing documentation structure, whether that's something in a Windows machine where you have shared drives, you have shared folders, or more commonly, a structure like Salesforce, which does a very good job at visualizing all of those silos. And the concern about domain knowledge dying goes down because the AI is consuming everything and it's consuming it in a smart way. So you can start to ask it questions that you would formerly had to have asked the person that knew what they were talking about. And all of that work, all that hard work, all that good work that the public sector workers do is going to be captured and codified using AI agents.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I was going to say a few things. One, I think I'm interested in unpacking barriers a little more, uh, and you kind of touched upon like the value add, right? Like, what is the value of AI? And there's barriers, operational barriers not to adopting. There's operational barriers that are inherent in day-to-day work of a public sector employee, which are tribal knowledge maybe being one of them. I'm not familiar with how that tribal knowledge looks like in public sector, but I know it exists a lot in tangential industries, right? Manufacturing, life sciences.
Right.
Um, there's tons of tribal knowledge and tons of applications of artificial intelligence to aggregate that in terms of getting the workflows right, which Rebecca would touch upon because I know you had the big
Yeah.
like one of the barriers is workflows,
Yep.
and then also delivering those workflows using AI. So you can use AI on both sides of the coin. Let's say to capture the workflow and to then deliver it in a succinct way to an end user. But Michael, just coming back to the computer vision AI video analytics program, I guess again, let's look at this from two lenses. There's barriers as it relates to the technology for our technologists in the audience, and there's barriers as it relates to the industry, the public sector,
Mm-hmm.
that they're going to encounter when trying to adopt this technology, meaning like getting it bought in within the organization. Can you share a little bit about those barriers? And
Yes,
you can give a little bit of a flavor of maybe how those
absolutely.
issues.
And I'll put a disclaimer at the beginning that I'm going to talk about computer vision because it's very discrete. It's a very obvious thing, and it's something that we've done work on. But understand that these problems exist no matter what your data set is, whether it's video that's coming out of cities, or whether it's a bunch of financial information that the state has, or whether it's a bunch of tickets that have been put into the state. And a lot of those barriers are going to be the same. So, to talk about computer vision, barriers exist on the public sector side, the municipality side, because you rightly are risk averse in many scenarios because you're serving the public. It's not just your money that you're spending. It's the public's money. It's the public's information. So you want to be very skeptical of releasing that into the wild. So there's security needs that are good, but there's also just level skepticism that can prevent you from going down paths you otherwise would. I don't want public records requests from this. I don't want the paper to print this. I don't want blah blah blah. So you're going to be slow to try to adopt new things, and then you start to follow a playbook that hasn't really been written yet. What kind of insurance is needed if we're going to move this across? What kind of cybersecurity manuals do we need to follow? The state has cybersecurity requirements for any technology project that goes into it. So now the question is, do we need to update that for the new AI technology and all this sort of stuff? So there's slow adoption on that side, concern on that side. Then you go to the technologist side. Well, if you're just an employee of the whatever public sector unit and you are trying to get something done for that unit, then you're going to be able to look into specific models, build a specific ecosystem within that unit, and do things you need to do. How many pedestrians are crossing? Can I get a heat map of crosses? Can I do near misses? Whatever. Now, the issue is that's one person doing one thing. To scale AI, we want many people doing many things. So the technologist finds a use case and starts to build out a platform that can take in that use case. You start to touch a lot of public sector entities, and then very quickly that use case is that you realize that there's so many other things that the city needs in order to be effective with the value that you're giving from that one use case. And it becomes hard to then go in and tweak the model because you've built the platform for scale and you want to be able to release it to a lot of people. But you can get caught in specific models. You can get caught in a specific business plan. You can get caught in a specific deployment plan. And so you can see that both sides, there are things that might stop you from being able to effectively drive adoption. Now, I do have some solutions to that, but maybe we'll save that for.
Yeah, we'll flood the waters with some problems, and then we'll fish in the middle.
Well,
So
I can
Rebecca,
talk
I know
about.
you mentioned.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, Rebecca, I know you mentioned like workflows being a
Yes.
prerequisite, and the idea that like in order for you to get AI right, you have to document your processes right. So can you elaborate on that? Like, give us an example of what that looks like, and
Yeah, absolutely.
what a broken process is, what involves fixing a process. I'll let you solutionize us from the top, and I'll let Michael's problems float around a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. We were talking about some of the things that tech overall issues in government, and Michael highlighted them. Outdated processes, change averse culture. Those people in those roles have processes that have been defined for forever, right? We've worked in public sector, we've had cities and states and governments forever. There are regulations around security and compliance and all of those things that need to happen. So, going back to the workflow side, if you haven't defined as a public sector entity what your process is, the AI isn't going to fix that for you. It isn't going to build that process for you. You really have to have mapped out what you want your processes to do and make sure they're doing them correctly before you can even train an agent or any AI to do that process for you. Um, I was going to talk a little bit about an example for you of process. Sorry, lost my train of thought there. So one of the things that Salesforce does natively really well is case management, and we use it all over the world in public sector for accepting applications for assistance, to tracking complaints for different things, to monitoring appointments. All of those kind of things are part of public sector case management. If you don't have your process defined as to what requires an escalation, what is a priority case, what is your timeline and what needs to be done there, your process isn't going to be able to your AI isn't going to be able to say this is a priority case if you haven't defined that already, and what your reasons are behind that, and what statuses those are and why, and the steps that go into that. So, in that just one example, there are many different processes that would happen, but I'm focusing on case beginning to end. It comes in, it gets logged, it gets prioritized based on a type of case and a person that needs to handle it. An agent is probably the first person who's going to handle most of those cases. But if you haven't defined that first step is an agent needing to look at it and say, 1, 2, 3 need to be done, it's not going to happen. You have to be able to have that process mapped out and done before you start trying to train your agents to do it.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I'll tell you, just kind of again tangentially, we do work with some large financial institutions, and part of the discussion revolves around like the need, if you're going to use large language models and agents, call them a packaged large language model with additional components. When you're dealing with compliance, you need guardrails, but those guardrails need to be, like, I'll just call them hardened.
Yes.
And part of the way that some of these financial institutions harden those guardrails when they're looking at compliance is that they turn their standard operating procedures and documentations into explicit business rules.
Mhm.
Those rules work as part of like a hybrid AI interface to prevent the agent from spewing out what it thinks is a correct answer, but is not correct because it doesn't consider like these tighter guardrails around the compliance aspect that are part of the documentation sources. And anyway, without unpacking this further, I think it's interesting that you kind of articulated this in a completely different sector, but with the same purpose, like process mapping, understanding processes, and using that as a guardrail for the AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And with all of the security and compliance issues throughout the government as well, just being able to train your models what data to look at or what data they shouldn't look at is really important. We have in our constituent services, a lot of personal information gets shared. And that is one of the biggest concerns that we often see about AI is tapping into that personal data and having it shared unintentionally. So making sure that the security guardrails, as you said, are in place, and using things like GovCloud and Salesforce to manage where your data sits and what it looks like in before you even connect it to these models is really important.
Okay, yeah, I agree. Michael, I know we've left a couple of your problems floating around. Do you want to pick one up and help us?
Well, I'll tell you,
we could get solved?
I do, because I was reminded that as Rebbeca was wowing everyone, I was reminded that there's a reason I was excited to sit on here with her. AI is a technology shift. Now, there's reasons to be very excited about AI. You know, that's the joke. There's AI in my golf club. Well, everything's AI. So there's reason to be skeptical of AI. There's also reasons to be excited about AI, especially when you look at some of the computer vision platforms that I've seen over the past couple of weeks. There's things that really move the needle emotionally when you can see, hey, we were able to prevent wrong way drivers to a 100% degree, and that's protecting people. You can pull up near misses and how we're going to prevent that. AI is very exciting. However, it is a technology shift, and that's been done before. So even though AI is exciting and there's a lot of new things and it's not very well understood en masse, we need to remember that we should learn from what we've done in the past and not try to reinvent the wheel as we try to scale AI. So that's why the analogy of Salesforce in the public sector is a very good one, because Rebbeca doesn't work for Salesforce. She is a contractor, a partner, a knowledgeable partner that understands the Salesforce ecosystem, but she works for a different company, and then they engage with a different company. So there's this third place where Rebbeca has the knowledge of Salesforce, understands how to make things happen in Salesforce, but she also has the room, I would say, just the enterprise room to also understand the cybersecurity requirements, also understand the unique needs of the public sector, also understand how to harden those guardrails. So that concept of partnership, of ecosystem building, is something that those who want to see AI succeed should really pay attention to. And I'll throw it back to you, Konrad. I think that would be a great introduction for Rebbeca to talk about some of her experience building Salesforce up in the public sector. But I'll see what you think, Konrad.
Yeah, I was gonna just maybe add a little bit more to your point. So,
Yep.
as you describe these kind of positions, right? And I would say two things. One, a little self promotion for us, Michael. So, if you recall, you played an important role along with me and like 40 other consortium members and 3 other organizations in submitting a AI policy posture to the Office of Science and Technology. And in that document, it reads a little bit like I said, like an instruction manual. But in that document, there is a specific place for um, recommendations that collectively us as the AI Applied Consortium, the National Association of Wholesalers, the United States Center of Advanced Manufacturing, and PILCO, which is a group of 50 oil and gas executives, kind of collectively, with the representations of those organizations, maybe not collectively, every single person in those organizations signed into, which spoke to a variety of different dimensions. But one of the dimensions was contract vehicles, procurement processes, and the aspect of innovation velocity. And specifically, what I mean by throwing all those terms at you guys, and you probably are aware, is again coming back to the red tape. So there's procedures and processes in bringing AI, and then there's AI, and AI is moving very fast. And every day that you sit at the sidelines, there's an opportunity loss, and that opportunity loss grows not only because you're not using the technology, but because you're maybe even not digitizing things that you can use later on for purpose to train the AI or to evolve it. So that was a really nice long-winded plug, but also a nice way of maybe having you guys talk to us a little bit about contract vehicles. And I've been exposed to these in an interesting way where I've had some public sector deals where like, okay, it's great that you guys know all this, but you don't have a contract. You need to go to this other party. That other party is going to have to wait because there's certain budgets that have to be allocated. So how do we navigate these waters, and how do we convince the public sector that they need to maybe rethink some of the ways in which they approach this technology without you guys creating enemies, uh, over the video, because you may have some public sector interest. You don't want to name anyone. Just let's keep things ambiguous. But so, I
Sure.
mean,
I can
Rebbeca,
talk a
what can
little
you
bit
say to that?
about what we've experienced in government contracting and procurement sides. I mean, they face a lot of the same challenges that tech and government does anyway, with like I said, outdated process, paper systems. RFP, RFQ, or whatever responses are notoriously paper heavy, being submitted in binders, all of those kind of things. There has been a shift in the last several years to emailing and uploading, and that's one tech shift. Like Michael said, we're continually shifting in how our tech works. And hopefully, AI can come in to help some of these processes with document generation and helping to build a contract quickly with all of the details that are needed to summarize a response for our reviewers to see if they can quickly evaluate things. We're sitting right now waiting 3 weeks after we submitted a RFI for a response, because the time that it takes for those people in the agencies to actually review them and then evaluate them, it's all manual mostly. And that is somewhere where really I think AI could help it, partially with what Michael talked about earlier, with all of the documentation that is available being fed in and used as the learning for these models. Doing that in procurement will drive better evaluation tools, quick objective data calculations, those kind of things that can be done really easily, can happen quickly in the AI world, and then they can give you back a summary. That's one of the things the Agent Force does really, really well. Summarize a record, summarize a visit, summarize a document. I use ChatGPT to summarize the document for the RFP to say, what do I need to submit here? So using just all of those different pieces of the technology will really speed up that process, I think, and help the people who are doing it to be able to focus on better evaluating the real criteria that is needed there, instead of wading through books and volumes of paper as they're trying to do that.
Yeah, I like the using AI to adopt AI kind of mantra,
Mm-hmm.
infusing it in your day to day effort for procurement perspective. It is a little bit of a not a Pandora's box, but a kind of a what is the word I'm looking for? It's a cyclic sort of
Yeah.
process, right? Because where do you start? It's a paradox. That's what I was looking for,
Yes.
right? So you have to get through, I guess, the initial pains of getting this into your organization, and then when you can infuse it into maybe the lowest hanging, most valuable things in your organization, including these procurement processes, that could probably alleviate a lot of the cycle times to bringing in bigger, better, more impactful things.
Yes.
No, I don't really want to sound super poetic, but it's almost as if AI and these data training technologies are bringing to a close this digitizing era where we've gone from analog to digital. We've understand how that technology has moved, but that shift from analog to digital has created so much more data, literal datums, little data points, where you don't have you don't have a paper that you've written out. You have 18 different drafts and you've sent them all out and all that sort of stuff. And that goes on and on and on, and it gets echoed and echoed and echoed. And now you have an H drive, a K drive, an M drive, and everybody has their own piece of documentation. And then you talk to Marta and John and Steve, and they all have different answers. And because that shift to digital has given us so many more channels to use, and it's way easier to spin up a channel, you can see how these AI tools are going to start to get us back to being more human. Because humans understand. When I was trying to explain Salesforce to my father, I was trying to explain, when you worked in the 90s, you would have paper and then you'd put it in an inbox and then you'd move it from an inbox to an outbox and it would move like that. Salesforce gives you a digital space that feels more tactile. So you're moving things around that digital space, but you start to understand inherently where they are. I think that AI is really going to boost that. And I know that's a little funky, but if you want to be a supreme optimist about AI, that's one way you can.
Optimist. I live in Texas. I don't believe in seasons, guys.
Yeah.
Just one hot season. It's all positive, I guess.
That's right.
So let me maybe circle back and narrow the discussion a little bit in terms of succinct maybe takeaways for our audience. So one is, and maybe you guys can both weigh in, what are top 3 use cases for artificial intelligence in the public sector? And they don't have to be maybe the ones that are documented in the context of Gartner reports, but in your opinions, where are the 3 ones that are both succinct in their articulation and maybe most impactful for purpose? And you can caveat it, like maybe it's not all public sector, maybe it's a specific part of the public sector. So what you guys can maybe articulate 3 each for our audience.
Well, I'll go first.
Yeah,
And I
don't
hope I
use
don't steal.
GPT, Mikey.
I hope I don't steal any of Rebecca's.
And
So
fused answers are not allowed.
those establishing a guardrailed and well understood language model, LLM, what have you, establishing that in an agency, we'll call it an agency, that could be a city, what have you, that is fed that backlog of process documentation is going to be very helpful, because ubiquitously there is a bunch of storage with a bunch of documents, and it's very hard to make sense of it. But if you are able to actually take the guts of ChatGPT and put it into the agency system in a way that people are comfortable with, instead of flailing around and asking people to send you this and send you that, everything goes into the pot, and then the AI agent pulls it out of the pot and says, this is how you do a payment. This is how you send a car to someone who needs it, whatever it is that you're doing.
I mean, I love that you gave that example, only because I think it speaks to, like, first of all, what I hear from industry. And the second, like, in effect, what you're saying is like build a foundation model for purpose that isn't just a world model that GPT trained on Reddit, Wikipedia, and web pages.
Yes, exactly.
But rather one that has domain specific capabilities, and then that in effect is the one that can bring the most value, because it's like hyper specialized. It is using that ability to kind of engage and allow user engagement at a natural language level, which opens the door to a lot of different people to be able to use it. Isn't just it's not just a neural network. It is on the back end, but on the front end, it's in this intelligent, agent, if you will, right? So I love that you use that as an example. What about your number 2 and 3?
Well, that is the first one's probably your 80%. That's what's going to get people excited. That's what people are going to start to wake up to the power of AI. Now, obviously, when people think AI, they think ChatGPT right now. They think natural language processing, because that's what people see the most. There are a lot of specific, powerful machine learning tools that you can put into data sets to do things like fraud detection. I think fraud detection or just anomaly detection is probably your second biggest thing in the public sector. When you're dealing with huge amounts of data, it can be very easy to get let a duplicate slip in. People can try to game the system. It happens all the time. And as a person staring at one at a time, you start to forget what they all look like. But if you're running AI tools on those data sets, then they can pull in anomaly detection very quickly. That is something we've seen happen. That's actually been executed in the places that we
let me ask you, Michael. This may be a naive question, but for those types of like the machine learning things, right? What is the preferred direction, or what are the considerations when you do like build versus? By the way, we didn't rehearse any of this, so I'm sorry. I'm getting curious in your answers. Build versus buy for like analytics platforms versus building out like an in-house application to do analytics. Like, how often does one happen versus the other?
I am making I'm not making them up, but I don't know for sure. I imagine buy is 15x more common because of how data moves through the public sector and probably anywhere. There are some industries and some companies that have these ninja teams that are trying to learn all this stuff, but because of how the ecosystem works, Salesforce is a great example. You have procured Salesforce and you've engaged Salesforce experts to give you Salesforce value. And then Salesforce has AI tools that it's starting to spin up so that you can take advantage of those tools. And in that scenario, I would call that a buy, because you are using you're picking off an AI menu in Salesforce or Azure or AWS or IBM or whatever it is. However, it's how individual contributors get things done in their specific domains. So I think buy happens a lot more. You're not building much from scratch, but even within that, there's a huge spectrum of engaged and successful buy versus just throw money at the problem and hope it goes away buy.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess just thinking about this, I'm sure because of the bleeding edge of what is large language models, agentic frameworks, AI, and multimodal AI, there's more of an appetite to build. Would you say so? Because there isn't enough out there.
So yes, there's an appetite to build because it is bleeding edge, and you're going to get more value out of someone who can write Python scripts, can call specific open source models, and can tune those models and understand the concepts of tuning. The issue you have in the public sector and in the industry is that we're busy. You know what I mean? People are busy, and it's hard to find the space to do that sort of thing, which is where experts like Rebbeca and other experts right now those are the folks who are building. I mean, it's energizing to work with students because you see a lot of this happening at the student level. And I'm not even talking about academia, because academia is a public sector concern. It's that E in SLED, and they have certain metrics they want to hit. But you see a student who is just messing around with things, they're actually building some things. And if they have a good skill set and the ability to go out and find information, they're going to be building some interesting things. The question is, how do we graduate the things that students are building into an actual useful, deployable model that can go into something like a public sector agency? And those are the questions that we're answering right now. Is we're seeing things mature and matriculate in real time.
Right. Yeah. Rebbeca, I want to give you a chance. I know I said 3, you got 2, but I also gave you some hard questions in between there, so you get off with only 2. Can you give us a couple of top of mind use cases?
Yeah. For me, it's all about two sides of the coin. One, the citizens and how we improve their service. And I think that AI will improve that as it continues to grow and as it is doing now in 2 primary ways. One, access to information all the time. When you are a citizen trying to get some information, working with a government agency, government works 8 to 5 and Monday through Friday. So this gives full access to people who might not have access to that, right? It's more availability to those people. Also, it gives those constituents the ability to get more information and see their status and learn what they need to do to get their benefits. All of those kind of things, feeding people the information they need. I think that's what's really going to be primary in the first phases of AI adoption in public sector, is really using that simply information that's there and sharing it with everyone and having people be able to access their own information securely. The second thing I think is on the internal side of the agencies that are working, the AI can do so much around analytics and reporting information. In government, one of the biggest things is, what are you outputting? What have you done? How have you served your team? How have you helped? Where is your money gone? So being able to do those kind of really in-depth reports and analyze the data that's coming in, that's one area that I think on the internal side with the agencies will help a lot in terms of being able to do better predictive analytics and data-driven decisions.
Right. Yeah. All right. So we're coming to the casual question part of our podcast. So I got a couple of casual questions for you all, so everyone can just lean back now and relax. There's no more pop quizzes. So 2 things. One, I wanted to engage if you guys have explored this space. What is either the coolest or the strangest AI tool or example that you've seen in recent memory, or anything that like caught your interest? I'll lead with one, which was so you give you guys time to, because this is unrehearsed.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So I saw a bunch of cool tools, but I did see some really interesting things about illicit prompt injection and how, especially early on in the work with large language models, you could essentially set up information online that the large language model would parse for knowledge, and have that information uh, basically lead to an illicit response. So if you typoed maybe a question that might be a common question in by putting maybe some invisible character in, or some other character in that response, or in that question, the answer would take you to some illicit link or something. So you're like, what is the capital of Paris, and you put in a bunch of invisible characters in there, or you typoed it wrong, it would return an answer totally unrelated. And so prompt injection, and like just in general, the dimensions of cybersecurity um, introduced through large language models, and also the dimensions on how these technologies are going to revolutionize searching, right? So searching, traditional search engines are downtrending because answer-based search is becoming more popular. You're going now to ask questions of GPT or the GPT equivalent, whatever, Anthropic or whoever else, uh, instead of um, going to Google to search for particular things. So I found those to be very interesting and top of mind. And I'll leave with one more, just in terms of bias, is if you ever ask like GPT, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite number? It will overwhelmingly, and this is not just GPT, answer 7 in blue, because it was trained on data sets that represented that the general public favorite color is blue. I think I mentioned this in the past, but what I find interesting about that is it creates an ability to flood information. I won't point on particular like research organizations, but for some reason, even though they're not the most credible, they come up in my deep research probing when I'm looking for references. So there's a lot of interesting factors, I think, that I've come up across. And now that I've given you some stall time for you guys to think about this, maybe you can give me an
I
answer.
can tell you what mine is
Please,
very
Rebecca.
quickly. For me, it's very basic. The fact that as a Salesforce person who's been in the system for 10 years and been doing all different aspects of it, I have never been a developer, right? You need a special skill. You write the code, you do those kind of things. I have learned that with these models, if you write it out well, it'll give you the code. I used this to one of the AI models to generate all of the code I needed for my action, for my button, for all of those things. I think why that's exciting to me is I don't need a developer to do some basic things. Now, am I ever going to replace a developer with that? 100% no, because they know how to write all those things and how to get the details in and how to all of those pieces. I'm just asking it, please help me do this. But it can now. And I never had that capability before. So just the ability to use what's available now to augment what I'm already doing is super impressive and cool to me.
There's a lot for me. I'm trying to decide what's the most impactful. There's some work being done with drones, whether that's search and rescue off a coast, or I've talked with a company that is able to deliver heart attack resuscitation kits and save lives in that way. I have a couple of pastors in my family, and they do a lot of they have done a lot of theology study. So to see a GPT trained on specific theologians, Grudem, Calvin, the people who write these tomes, is what gives me the idea that we can use this for process documents in the state, because if you read a theology book and then you read a process document, you're about equally likely to fall asleep. So that's also cool. But just the bar none coolest thing was when we were in San Francisco, Konrad, and I rode my first Waymo driverless car. And just one, it is a level of magnitude cheaper than Uber, taxi, what have you. Now, there's concerns with that because you don't have a driver. However, just the power to have those rides be cheaper is insane. To watch it come without a driver is insane. To watch it drive people around without a driver is insane. It's a seismic shift in how things get done, how we move around, and just understanding the power that has to really replace a lot of cars in cities, to make cities more livable, more walkable. We were driving around in Europe in some of these small European towns, and how the cars just sort of merge in with the pedestrian traffic. And looking at that is like looking at a science fiction movie. And so we talk about all these things that AI can do and blah, 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 but then you can see technology truly changing, and it's really incredible.
Yeah, I remember that. San Francisco. I also have heard of pastors writing their sermons using GPT.
Yeah.
No.
Well, it's an arcane sort of question. What would a Baptist think versus a Presbyterian? You can ask questions like that, and it'll say, well, I have my Presbyterians here and I have my Baptists here. I'll answer the question using two different data sets, and we'll see what we get.
Targeted messaging applies to all, right?
Yep.
All right. So I want to thank you guys for coming up at the end, and I want to maybe just lead a little bit with the upcoming set of sessions. But first, thank you both.
Absolutely.
For the time
Thank
today,
you.
and thank you for our
Thank
audience.
you.
So upcoming on our podcast is going to be essentially a lead in to our next two major events that we're doing. One of them is going to be in collaboration with the National Association of Wholesalers, who's a very large ecosystem of wholesale distributors in North America and United States. If you haven't followed us or you don't know about the partnership that we recently announced, it speaks to our collaboration to bring artificial intelligence to that ecosystem, which is a very large group of, like I said, wholesale distributors representing trillions and trillions of dollars in the U.S. economy. So a really powerful partnership. I'm really proud of us coming together for that. And we're going to be at their technology event called Shift, May the 13th through the 15th. And before that, on the podcast, we're going to have a few of the speakers, including T.C. Murray, who's a group president for a very large electronics distributor, and including other folks that are part of that session. And then coming up May 29th, we're going to be, myself and Michael actually are going to be in Lexington, Kentucky, hosted at the University of Kentucky at our quarterly symposium focused on manufacturing. We have a really great lineup there, including the chair of the prestigious aerospace engineering department out of University of Kentucky, and several other great speakers. And so we'll also be presenting in our podcast series between now and then one or two individuals around experts in AI and manufacturing. So that's the upcoming set of series. We have almost maybe even more than 50 speakers lined up throughout this year, and we'll be sharing those through our LinkedIn channels as we get them on the schedule. So again, Rebecca and Michael, thank you for joining us. Thank you, everyone. And we look forward to having you on another podcast.
Thank you.
Absolutely.